before we talk about the invocation of Article 50, the big news in the next 24 hours will be who's in her cabinet.
Yes.
It's a tricky balancing act, isn't it? Pleasing all the elements of her party and the country as well.
Well, I think the most important point that markets will be looking for is who's sitting in the Chancellor's seat, and also how professional this cabinet is. One of the consequences of what I call post-factual politics, and we also see this in the U.S., is a lot of concern from the private sector about who's going to be running the show. Now, Theresa May, probably more sensible, less bombastic than some of the other Conservative Party candidates, reassuring markets. And she'll be choosing from those who backed her formally, even though she didn't actually go to a vote in the end. And I wouldn't be surprised if she does go for some of the more sensible Brexiteers in an attempt to heal the party, because that will be her #1 priority.
Right, sensibility is something we keep hearing about. She sounds eminently practical and reasonable. What does she do in the next year, in addition to forming this cabinet, to give herself the capability and the most leverage to successfully negotiate an exit?
Well, she has said quite clearly that leave means leave. And I think prior to that, a lot of investors looked at the fact that she was a so-called soft remainer and thought perhaps it wouldn't happen. We've been quite clear that we think Brexit happens, and indeed she has been quite clear that Brexit will happen. Your previous commentator talked about invoking Article 50. I disagree slightly on the timing. I think the fact that she's come in 9 weeks earlier than might have been expected does give her time to work on that negotiating strategy, and perhaps invoke Article 50 a bit sooner, which would reduce uncertainty in some ways.
Who would you consider having as the sort of chief negotiator in Brexit discussions? We know a cabinet position will be created. Does it have to be a Brexiteer?
I'm not sure it does, actually. There are people who, in the UK in the civil service, who know the mechanics of Brussels very well. I think you want someone who's perceived to drive a hard bargain. But what's going to be critical is how Brussels and how the European Union works, and that's a highly specialized discipline.
Right, and whoever she picks, of course, the old frameworks don't seem to apply anymore, right? Investors, policymakers are beginning to understand that there's a loss of trust in the elites. How do they respond to that?
I'm afraid that they haven't exactly invented a new playbook yet, which is why her priority will be, first of all, healing the party and focusing on party discipline. I think secondarily to reassure markets that things are under control. Taking the country through these negotiations is going to require a lot of compromise and consensus building. And one of the, I think the weaknesses in the way that she came to power, not through an election, is going to be it's harder to do that when you haven't got that explicit kind of mandate.